very, very lovely to be here. And I'm slightly gutted I can't see any of you. But we've got a session this afternoon, I guess we're in the afternoon now, where we're going to chat about what makes an award-winning entry. And I am joined by Seb and Ishtar, who are going to sit on a panel with me today to talk about their experience because they have a lot of it. So before we go any further, I'm going to ask these two to both introduce themselves so you can have a little bit of a sense of who you're talking with today. And perhaps I should just introduce myself first. I'm Rachel Bell. I think you can probably see my name at the bottom of my picture. And some of you may remember an agency called Shine, which I started a very long time ago. And then also Mischief PR. And then we more recently did the Academy with Mitch and Dan and John Doe and Aduro, and have a track record of starting agencies, which I'm very proud to say have all been led by outstanding people who have managed to win lots and lots of lovely awards for their agencies and done super well. So I just swan along on the coattails of very talented people, which is marvelous. So that's a little bit about me. My background's probably largely consumer, but I work as a non-exec for a number of agencies now across sectors, from investor relations to specialist tech to sectors outside of our industry, and actually now businesses outside of PR, would you believe it? So that's a little bit about me. And Seb, why don't I hand to you to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Very odd, can't see anyone, but I'm sure you're all there. So I'm Seb, been in industry for about coming up to 20 years. Now, I'm a very proud consumer brand generalist. Always been agency side, started my career at Freud, moved on to Mischief, as Rachel mentioned, with Dan and Mitch, and then found my way to Hope and Glory. Been at Hope and Glory, been joint MD there since 2019. Um, Working on the work, very much that's kind of our ethos as much as working on the agency. And in our time, we are fortunate enough to have won, yeah, lots of awards for lots of different pieces of work for lots of different clients. So, yeah, very excited to be here today. Now on to you, Ishta.
Thanks, and hi everyone. It's also odd not to be able to see your faces, but but giving you a wave. My name is Ishtar. In my day job, I lead people and organizations communications for Mars Pet Care. But I have spent time, obviously in-house now, but previously in big agency and also kind of more specialized boutique agency. My background is healthcare, specialized health and well-being kind of communications, but obviously a bit more broad now, a lot of brand comms and corporate reputation and things like that. And yeah, I used to lead when I was an agency. I used to lead a lot of our marketing and award efforts, and have been a judge for PRCA and several others for many years. Yeah. So it's always a fun time. It's always great reading the entries. So hopefully we can share a few helpful tips today.
And actually, you've just made me think, Ishtar, it's probably pertinent for me to mention that as well as being on the board at the PRCA for a number of years, and I think you were as well, Ishtar, were you on the board? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why you weren't ever, Seb. You must have managed to skip that move. As well as being on the board of the PRCA for a lot of years, I'm head judge at the PRCA awards for the last few years, and that's probably why I'm chairing today. So, without a further ado, why don't I just give you two minutes just to give you the sort of sense of the PRCA awards and kind of what shape they take. So. We get about 300 to 400 award entries every year. And of course, you guys will know because you're used to paying those dreadful award entry fees that we all hate so much. Um, that there are a lot of categories out there. But I have to say, I think the PRCA are one of the award categories that are really highly respected for fantastic work. And I think, the opportunity to take home to your team an industry award from our trade body, I think it says an enormous amount. Um, to your clients, it says an enormous amount to the industry. And of course, it's an enormous morale boost for people that have worked so hard on campaigns. So I'm a huge fan of the awards. I think if you come into the industry, we tend to be the type of people that love to wing a gong anyway. The PRCA has 35, roughly 35 categories. And in different years, it's focused on having awards both for in-house and for agency. In the last couple of years, we've been combining that to actually do one award per category, but with runners up to showcase also, great work. But that tends to only happen where we've got a significant number of entries for a category. And those categories that are most hotly contended almost without exception are the media relations award entry and the consumer award entries. And in fact, those two categories are now broken into two sections. One is high budget and low budget. That's been traditionally the case when that's traditionally the case with consumer, but more recently it's also been the case with media relations introduced for this year. And it's just worth mentioning as well that when you're putting in your awards, it's really good to think beyond just putting it in for media relations or consumer. Healthcare is another hotly contended area, and think sort of horizontally about what other connected category entries are there available to you that might not be quite as many entries for, because obviously that gives you a better chance of winning. I'm thinking things like automotive, diversity, tech can be great entries. So, without further ado, let me let me kick off the questions. So I'm going to start off with you, Ishtar. Let's talk about what we think distinguishes a great award entry from just a good one.
Yeah, I think for me, it really comes back to the storytelling. I think we're really good at doing that for our clients when we're working on campaigns. I think, but we're really bad at doing it a lot of the time when we're putting together an entry. We see a lot of entries that are just a lot of words, but not actually telling you what you need to know. I think thinking through the structure of your entry and making sure you've got smart objectives in there that map back to the results that you're going to show. My kind of rule of thumb is really like make it easy for us as judges to see, kind of what was the context of the challenge that you had in front of you? Why was your strategy the right one and, the right one to reach the target audiences that you had? Why was it super creative and inspiring and different or leveraging something in a different way? And how did you really smash your KPIs out of the park? And I think the last bit is really how do you take it from just, kind of vanity metrics into real impact for your client or for your organization? And often, how is that then continuing on? I think a lot of the time people stop at the first hurdle, and really the entries that make the biggest impact on us, I think, are the ones that you can really look at and say, wow, that had, that really did what it was aiming to do and more.
I love that. I think, you're completely right. Context, I think when you're judging is, almost everything, because if you can't get the context quickly that this award is, the
Mhm.
environment this award is trying to compete in terms of
Yeah.
the work, it makes the job a much harder job to do. What do you think, Seb?
Um, I mean, just focusing on one of those points for me, and I think this is for me, which distinguishes the great, is the ensuring the results ladder back to the objective. The number of entries that I have read, which have been, our objective was to, for example, increase brand awareness metrics. And then the results are all about the pieces of coverage. I'm like, but wait, hang on a bit. How does that ladder up to that really singular focus objective? So I think that for me would be the biggest advice as well is the results measure back up to the objective. And as Ishta said, you're right. We're storytellers. Make sure there is clarity of that beginning, middle, and end. But yeah, smart objectives for me is the killer at the moment.
And I think, you've just echoed the point I was going to make if it wasn't covered, which
Sorry.
is too often I feel that people get a bit lost in the creative without linking why the creative was so instrumental in allowing them to deliver that objective and get those results.
Precisely.
Um,
Precisely.
it's the linking piece. It's
Yeah.
not just the most creative work. It's actually why what was creative in the work to get to the results that
Yeah.
delivered.
It's
Because we all,
timely with Cannes happening this week, isn't it? Which I think is all about the craft, right? But I think for PRCA awards, and if you look at what's in the entry pack and in the requirements, we're really looking for work that has moved the needle, right? And has set clear, smart KPIs and delivered on those. Not, it wasn't just about a cool piece of creative, although obviously that is helpful, but it all needs to map back, right, to moving the needle in the way that you intended.
And
yeah,
because this isn't necessarily coming up in other questions, I think I also just want to bring in two other elements that we want to chat about. And one is how important insight is and validating your approach. Because I know when we're looking at award entries, that's something that always carries a lot of weight in an entry is when it's really clear that the assessment of the approach in terms of what's driving the creative, the insight
yeah.
tells us that we're going to be able to get to that is really, really key. I
Yeah.
don't
And I think, Rachel, to your point just there about the link between the three, right? The creative is possible because of the insight. The
know.
results are possible because of the creative. And I genuinely see these things as a story. It's a beginning, middle, and end. And if we can link those three together in a really clear, compelling way, as Ishtar was saying before, I think you're onto a winner. But I do think you've also got to be incredibly reductive and selective on whether, and that's the hard part sometimes. It's like, okay, well, having done that process, does it stand up? And if it doesn't, that might be a question for
Yeah,
the actual award itself.
I completely agree. Ishtar, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just say don't assume that the judges know what you've done either, because I think it's easy when you're in it, right? You've done all the work, you've been there from the beginning, that
Yeah,
you know what, like, all of the different steps. And I think sometimes that's missing. People want to jump into, right away into this is the results that we generated, or this was the cool creative, and they miss even just, one or two sentences on this is the data that we looked at in order to get there, or this is the survey that we did in order to get there, right? That informed why these were the right target audiences. Sometimes they just say, this is our target audience. And we say, okay, but why, right? Like, why is that the right target audience for this? Why is that going to be so impactful in driving sales, or, whatever it is? And, so connect the dots for us, I think is, I guess my biggest tip is, help us understand, the why, not just the what happened.
Yeah, and I think the last part of that puzzle, whilst we're just talking about great entries, is also the evaluation. You know,
mm,
making sure that to complete that circle, that from that objective, that actually the metrics around the results, where the results appeared, why they were particularly pertinent, how the results delivered the strategy, but also met the objective. In terms of what we channel
definitely.
where you chose to put the work and actually how you then approach um, assimilating what made a good result in this is where you can start to see the intelligence in the entry. I think when you're judging it, you can see that you're dealing with people that have really thought all the way through the line on what they've set out to do, but most importantly, why what they've done was worked, and that's where I think it kind of almost shows up is
Yeah.
in the results. So,
And,
you guys have
and
points.
Rachel, I think that word actually smart. If you can apply that to everything, right? It's just started with talking about smart objectives, but actually insights, a smart insight, a smart piece of creative, and then smart measurable metrics. I think, yeah, if you can put that lens on stuff as well, it's yeah, really important. Could be really useful.
And I think, where, the panels that are put together to judge the award entries, they're generally very seasoned people that have done a lot of work. And so, it kind of gets you, doesn't it? When you see something, you go, oh my God, that's so clever. Oh, I really love
It's,
that. We all get inspired and excited by the work. And when you see that coming through in the entry, and that sense of both critical thinking and passion, I think it's I think, to your point about storytelling, Seb, it's really easy to feel the entry, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it is that it's classic, right, in all different walks of life. But I wish I would have thought of that. And that is a remarkable, because that's an emotional kind of reaction, right? I'm talking all about objectives and smart and measurable stuff, which I think is so important. But yeah, that kind of
That's my litmus test, right? Is
yeah,
like if
it's
you've
so
got
true.
that you get that little niggle of like, wow, I really wish that was
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was something that I thought of. But I think the other side of the coin is for me as well is like bigger isn't always better, right? I think sometimes it's just a really smartly done campaign that had a really niche target audience and but was tricky to get to, and they did it in a really clever way and smashed their targets, right? Because I think we always think like the bigger the campaign, the sexier it is, right? Like in some of these topic areas, those are the ones that are going to win. And yes, sometimes they do, but I do think that a campaign that's just really, really well executed and has, incredible impact in the way it intended can beat out those sexier campaigns when they're just talking about, kind of clicks and views and things like that.
yeah. And I think Ishta, just thinking about what you said, I think they can have even a greater impact than the bigger stuff, because we see a lot of that kind of big stuff quite often. And so actually that kind of more niche, as you were saying, can have greater impact. Yeah, I love that.
Let's just move on to talking about, when we're seeing a lot of entries, what the things are that really immediately grab our attention.
I think we said most of it. I think clarity is incredibly important for me from a personal perspective. I'm also quite, and I think lots of us are visually led. So I think the way that it looks, and I'm in this middle place because I find it quite hard, perhaps in a Word document, which is just Word and no visual. But then on the other hand, I find it quite hard when there's loads of different graphics going on and I can't really tell what's going on. So something which is very clear, very visual, which also brings again the points that we're saying about the beginning, the middle, the end. The insight, the creative, the action, the measurable impacts. And the only advice that I would give as well to this is something that we practice and we do quite a lot, which is, can you in a paragraph get the key information for the entry? And I think that is such a useful exercise, which can you tell me what in the paragraph, the objective, the insight, who you focused on as an audience, the creative, and then actually the key result that measured up to the objective. I think that is a good exercise to try for anyone.
Yeah, I agree. Ishta, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I would say for me, what jumps off the page, I would say, the breadth. If I can see the breadth of thinking, that always, yeah, that always jumps off for me. I think looking at if they're BAU, like how is it, that level
Mm,
above, right? Like what sets it apart? So if it's, if there's stock standard media relations tactics, like what was it the creative that set it apart? What was, was it the amazing partnership with a celebrity ambassador that fit for this reason and was really hard to get? Do you know what I mean? I want to see something that like is the innovation. So if it's not the tactics themselves, then like what is the innovation? And if I can't really tell, then that's not probably not going to be one of our winners. I agree with Seb on the layout. I don't think it needs to be, overdone. I think, a really nice and simple kind of client testimonial or, something else, like, in a breakout box can be really nice. But I think sometimes we try to throw everything there, and it's too much. But equally, we read so many entries at a time, and so if it's just words on a page for 3 pages, like you get lost. I tell people like, don't be afraid of bullet points. Like help
yeah,
us, just get, as you say, like your beginning, middle, and end, but also what is the most important stuff. And I would say have someone who was not on the project team read it. Like once it's done, give someone who has no context
yeah.
or only a little context read it and say, do you get what we're trying to say here? Because I think we're so in the weeds sometimes that you can put a lot of detail in sometimes in the wrong spots.
I think that is one of the best tips ever to have someone else to read it because yeah, just going back to some of the entries which have been the harder ones to judge. It's when we're having to do the work. And like Ishtar was saying, when you get lost. And so therefore you're really having to dig deep. And when you've got lots of entries, that's really hard. So just think about that. But I think, yeah, your point about getting someone outside of the team to read it is, yeah, spot on.
Um, I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask was about, how visual or not the award entries should be. And I think you guys have probably covered that. But, one of the things that I was just going to add to this was I really love a little summary box. It kind of plays into what you were saying, Ishta, when they just, say at the top, kind of almost why they feel this is an award-winning piece of work. It's your elevator pitch point, Seb, isn't it? Just broken out. And I just think the other thing I was going to say is you said it should don't be afraid of a bullet point. I mean, I would say it's almost essential, right, to actually section up what you're saying and get it into, bite-sized pieces that tell that story. Um, and the other thing I love, in terms of grabbing attention, is when there is a bit of a human element that leads you into it. I don't think it doesn't have to be a gag, but it can be, just something that it could be a bit of humor, could be just something that makes you sort of settle into this being an enjoyable entry to read. I think it's so important to remember just how many other pieces of work you're going to be viewed alongside. And so making this content as absorbable as possible for the person that is reading it, it needs to be an easy read and it needs to be easy to navigate. And those two things together, I think, really get you around that piece of paper. Or you've got two sides, I think, of A4. Um,
Yeah. And I would
and
say that's
we don't want 6 point size, do we?
I would say as well that that's even more important. Like obviously having that human side, that human lens like on your work is incredibly important. But I think in particular on those kind of team or individual submissions as well. I think sometimes for the team or the agency submissions, it's a lot on the work. It's a lot of, kind of the policy and programs that you've got in place. And then you almost forget the actual the people, which we know is like the lifeblood. So how do you bring in the voice of your team? How do you bring to life that individual person that you're putting forward? Because again, you know them really well, but we don't. So, why are they so amazing? Why do they stand above the rest? And if you can make that abundantly clear, then you're already miles ahead.
Um, yeah, I love that point. We haven't talked much about, we're talking mainly about creative entries, and the work. But maybe we'll spend a little moment talking about agency entries in a moment. But I would just wanted to say to everybody that's listening, if you've got any questions that are occurring to you whilst we are chatting, please feel free to put them into the chat bar because we'll come to them at the end and we can pick those up. For anybody that's sat there thinking, actually, I'd quite like to ask something, don't be shy of putting it up there and we'll make sure we, as much as we can, go through them. There was we've been asked to talk about, what the best way is to select the right category. We sort of touched on it in the end, at the beginning, about finding categories that you've got the best chance of winning at. But is there anything else that you guys would want to add to that?
I think that's me. No, again, I'm going to use the word smart. Be smart. I mean, we've always done this, where we felt we may have a good chance, but maybe not a great chance. We've been smart about looking at the categories where we might have a bigger chance within that within the number as well. So I think it's just about being smart with what you've got. But yeah, apart from that, I think it's the suitability of categories should be an easy one to kind of get in your head.
Yeah, brilliant. Any of you, Ishka?
Yeah, I would say as well, it is quite clear sometimes when an entry has been written once and then submitted a million times, maybe not even just to one, kind of award, yeah, basically awards. And we can really tell when it hasn't been tailored. And so I think it's kind of the reverse of that, which is looking at the categories themselves. What are we looking for in each of those kind of criteria, and are you covering it, right? So a lot of the time, in media relations, we'll get stuff that is kind of an integrated campaign, and media relations is like one tiny part, right? And you're probably not going to win because you're up against campaigns where media relations was the heart and soul of that, of that work. And so I think it is being smart, but it's also paying attention, right? And
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
it's not to say that you can't submit one piece of work to different categories, but make sure that you've taken the time to look over the criteria
yeah,
and change it enough so that we can tell why it's being submitted in that category. Because we do get that sometimes, and or even in the wrong category. Right, Rachel, we had stuff and we've been like, this actually should be in a completely different category. So just make sure you kind
And
of
we'll
cross
move
your
it.
T's, dot your I's.
Yeah, sometimes we will move it across categories if we think, you know, this money's going to be wasted. But it's, you don't want to be relying on the
mm,
judges, because what can happen is, and I'll explain at the end how the sort of judging process works, but it's got to reach us at the final panel in order for us to get the chance to move it across. And you could end up losing your chance if you're not in the right category at the point that you're getting judged by the kind of wider teams. So
yeah.
I think it's
And
just,
also a reminder that we're judging multiple categories, and so we're seeing the same entry like two or three times sometimes. So we're very cognizant when it's like the same one without any changes.
Tweaks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and whilst we're on the subject of, common mistakes that get made, what else would we call out in this area?
I think
Little vicious laugh there from
I think the one that we see every year, I think, is no budget being included. The objectives aren't smart or connected back in. I think you know, yeah, not proofing the entry at all before it
Mm.
comes through. So, kind of spelling mistakes or missing sentences and things like that, being over the word limit. So I think some of those kind of basic things can trip you up. So we don't love to kind of disqualify for that, but sometimes you have to, we can only really judge what's on the page, and sometimes it's not the right stuff.
Yeah, I think that they're right. The ones that I would quickly add probably are um, delving into internal processes or challenges in the narrative. Whilst I think that they're incredibly useful and incredibly useful learnings probably internally and for a campaign, I, I don't need that in an entry. Again, it's that clarity of the story that you're trying to tell and sell. So I think, yeah, just kind of trying to be selective in that, and then just that clear narrative. We talked about clarity so much, but really that yeah, what are you trying to say? How is it coming across? And testing it before you enter it with someone outside of the team is a brilliant piece of advice.
I would
uh,
also add, oops, sorry. I would also add, making it clear if you're an in-house team or an
Mm,
agency, like who's done the work, what the split is. It's less relevant who's done what, but it's more about the clarity for us as judges being able to see, if you're an in-house team that's submitting, where the agency has supported and where they haven't, and vice versa. We've actually had in a previous year the same entry submitted both by the agency and by the in-house team, which were slightly different. So I think, we're just really cognizant of that, and wanting to make sure that we're clear on where we're awarding, work that has been done by that team.
yeah, I mean, I certainly remember Ishtar judging with you, and there was one where it was an in-house entry, but it had the agency's name. I think it was on the agency's letterhead. Well, like, hang on a second, this is a Uh, I'd quite like to just expand this out a little bit to talk more for a moment, because I think there's a lot of mistakes also that come up in agency specific. Just to say that, there are best small, medium, large, best new agency, best specialist agency, and then there's best in-house team. So there are, and then there are the individual awards for young professional, and I think old professional. I think I might have won that one once. It's never a great one, is it?
I think we call it industry leader, maybe.
yeah.
In my day, that's literally how old I am. But talking about those categories, I think there are quite a lot of mistakes that we know listening to you talk, Ishta, that bring to mind for me, particularly thinking about best agency entries where things just don't feel that transparent. And when I say
Mm,
that, I'm thinking about where people are giving the turnover figure rather than the fee, or they're using revenue loosely, interchangeable with turnover, not making it clear that it's actually fee revenue versus expenses. The history of what growth has come, whether it's through acquisition, sort of the kind of clear financial metrics, leaving off the percentage profit, for me are particular bugbears because you're trying to judge a like for like agencies and you can be looking at some really good entries. But if you haven't got good commercial metrics to look at,
yeah,
that are comparative, then at the end of the day, you're ending up really putting yourself back at that point, which
yeah,
is still sometimes can break our hearts as judges because you kind of can feel the strength and the integrity of the entry, or not. But you end up thinking, I'd really love to be awarding this to you, but you're not giving me enough critical information in
mm,
an area that there's so much innovation going on, but I haven't got the numbers, I haven't got the metrics. I'm not gonna be able to, I'm not gonna be able to hand this one over. So that can
yeah.
be okay. What else comes up on agency? Do we?
Yeah. I always look for like the trifecta. I think this applies for agency entries, but also for kind of individual ones which is, it's around the work, right? But it's around the kind of organization and then it's around the people. And so if you don't have enough, I think sometimes people over-index on one of those things, and forget, one or two of the other. And I think in order to be an agency of the year or an individual of the year, right, you really want to show the breadth of achievement across those areas, right? And so, yeah, kind of we're looking at, I hate to use like an all-arounder, but that, we're looking for someone who is great on all of those things. And I think this is where it helps to be, really self-critical on, is this the year? If so, why? Right? And and sometimes it's not. And you say, okay, actually next year will be a stronger story because we'll have, we'll be able to show the progression XYZ. Or, this person will have had XYZ. And so I think you just really think about, is 2025 our year? If so, great. But, and make sure that the story that you want to tell is the strongest story.
Yeah, do you know what? I couldn't agree more. As a putting on my hat as MD of Purple Glory, it's exactly that. It's being able to show the commercials, the work, the people, and the culture, but also being able to show what we've done through each of those things and then bring it back. Right? Okay, so what was our direction with people? What did we really focus on this year that was different, and how have we shown that? Again with the work and again with something else. So yeah, I totally agree. But it's also just looking at each of those parts and making sure that it all makes sense and that you have tied the knot at the end as well.
Yeah, and sometimes people they just don't they're just not clear enough about what they're trying to communicate, and that sounds maybe possibly a slightly vague comment, but I've read in entries where it's like best agency where they say they've got like an in-house doctor or something. You think, well, you haven't got an in-house doctor, have you? You're not paying somebody 50 grand a year to sit in the corner of the office and be the office doctor. So if you're going to put in, if you're doing some sort of
Mm,
high-tech medical um, offering for your team, be clear about it, what it is, because sometimes, some of these things can just sound a bit outlandish and far-fetched and like they're quite frankly made up. And
yeah.
so
And
if you,
that's when you start to question the rest, right? And then you suddenly have that thing. You're like, what? Hmm. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
sounds a bit of
But
nonsense.
but equally, if if you've got industry leading policies and programs, like
Hmm.
call those out, right? If you've got a menopause
Absolutely.
policy, if you've got miscarriage policy, if those are, if they're you've got inclusion diversity policies that are, are industry leading, we want to know that too, right? But I think help us understand what you guys are doing that is above BAU, because I think that's probably actually, listening to both of you and thinking back on some of the entries that we've seen is, I think the ones that fall down are, for the agencies in particular, are ones who put an entry in and we kind of think, yeah, we're all doing that. Like
Yeah.
that's all stuff that we're doing. That should be business as usual. And the ones that are winning are the ones that are articulating how they're going over and above what everyone else is doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So help us understand what you're doing differently.
Yeah,
That's
love that.
brilliant.
So for those people that haven't um this is their first time, haven't put in for an entry before, what would be your number one piece of advice? I mean, I feel like we've covered a lot of advice here. This is all good advice. But if you've never done this before, I mean, I quite liked the point about getting it checked by someone, but that's done it before.
I think, all right, I'm not going to give one. I've got a couple, which hopefully are new. Um, I think the one bit I haven't said, and that again I would compel everyone, is assign the best writer. Like there, we all work in teams, agencies, in-house, where some people may be better writers than the other. Just go it, and also in a way, sometimes our experience has been it doesn't matter whether they're part of the team, of course, having the context, having the understanding, but clarity of writing is so important for both the storytelling, but also getting across that data bit. And then just going back to kind of what we were talking about at the start is the format, just get that right. And it's so easy sometimes to think of that as or as an addition at the end, but actually just thinking through the structure and getting that right early on is really good. And the final thing I'll just say is be selective, be incredibly selective. Like to Ishtar, and actually you said it so brilliantly, is this going to really be in the mix within particularly highly competitive categories? And I think just being selective about what it is and being true, right? Being selective, yeah, it was great or it was good. Two different things.
Yeah, I like that. Ishta?
Yeah. I agree with all those points. I would say, just be laser focused on what you did that was innovative, creative, over and above, right? And I think that also comes down to the storytelling. I found the same thing, Seb, in our, when I was agency side in our teams, actually some of the most, impactful award entries were not written by the team who was working on it
Yeah.
because often you're too close to it. And what we used to do would we would go, okay, let's get a half an hour with the person who's going to write it and
Love that.
the kind of the team to download, here's all the things that we did, but then that kind of person who's sitting on the outside can say, okay, I'm just going to condense that into,
Yeah. Yeah.
what are the
Yeah.
golden nuggets of this campaign, right? And often I think some what I found is that if you've got the client teams writing it, it ends up being 2,000 words over before you even started. And so, because you want to put everything in it, right? It was your
Yeah.
baby. And so I think having, a bit of that outside perspective to be able to narrow you down can often help.
I just want to build on that point, and it's a bit of it's an agency perspective, but well, actually, this would work equally well in-house. But one of the things on a very practical level is to think internally about how seriously you're taking entering awards this year and how you're going to run the process internally. Um, Having an owner of awards rather than it just be a disparate thing that's happening between, directors that think, oh, maybe I'll put one in, but actually having a coordinated effort across the agency that's led by the head of the agency that appoints somebody to run the process of getting the award entries in. And actually, it plays into the points that both of you are making, is about getting the entry written from
Mm.
by probably someone quite senior on the team, not handing it down to the account exec to do, which I've seen happen so often. Why don't you just have a bash at it to start it off? And the fact is to know all your points about storytelling and getting the narrative right and putting it with a good writer. It's all about actually nailing the entire story from start to
Yeah.
finish as a piece of work. Because once it starts to go round many hands, and it's not just an edit job, it's actually a bit of a car crash where people are starting to move whole paragraphs around. Trying to get that back into something that feels like it's got a warm and entertaining, entry point, and it's got a really killer summary as to why this is important. If you haven't kind of got that summary of why this is a winning piece of work in your head before you write it, it's going to be hard to extract it afterwards.
Yeah.
You're writing your elevator pitch and moving out from that point to actually then really get into the story of telling it. And I've so often seen it be handed around and it goes on for months in the agency and everybody's sick before it gets to handing them in. So making it tight. And one of the things we used to do is we used to sit the directors in a boardroom for the day and they had to get on with award entry writing. And then the team would have to critique it to say whether they felt there were anything that we'd. So that would be their learning opportunity. But having single time where you get the job done, it can get the things out the door, rather than missing the early bird. It hangs on for another 2 weeks. It goes out on deadline. You haven't got any time to put any of the stuff, supporting evidence together. I wouldn't mind talking about that. So
Yeah. I was going to say as well, like thinking about, to your point about a coordinated award strategy, I think for people who haven't submitted for awards yet, or a lot in general, I think having that ownership, and also having that view of which ones do you want to go after, because I think once you make a short list or two, or you get that momentum and get some of that internal buy-in as well, I think that really helps. But often it can feel like, oh, it's quite insurmountable if you haven't done it before. But I think start with where you think you're going to have the best chance, those categories, maybe pick one or two of your best campaigns, right? And really have a go at making them something versus trying to do a million campaigns, like, okay, versus.
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there are so many top tips within all of that. So I think, the bulk of what I wanted to talk about, I really feel that we've covered. There's an interesting question in the chat, which is how important like video submissions are to go with the entries, to what extent they play a part, and the supporting materials that go with entries. What are your views about that?
Do you want me to kick off?
Go for it.
Okay, so this is an individual view. I judge an award on its entry, and usually on its written entry. And I think that if an award doesn't have a video, that will not make an impact on what it's awarded from my point of view. Of course, it's really beneficial to see emotionally how that piece might engage or that campaign or piece of work. I think even like they're just still images are really important. But they are supporting and they're supporting for a reason for me.
Yeah, and I think it's d different depending on which
Category.
awards you're
Yeah.
you're submitting for. But and I think I was just looking at Samantha's question, but I think the video. I think she's asking about a video entry, and I don't think I haven't seen that many at all. I think if you've got your creative has a hero piece of video that you can easily add to your entry, then that's a nice to have. I agree. It's a bonus. So
Yeah.
if we've read the entry and we've been wowed by it, then I'll take a look at the supplementary materials, right? But if it's, if we've read through the written entry and it's kind of so-so, by the time we get there, it's not really going to help you. So I think I would focus my 90% on the written, and
100%.
then the supplementary is a nice to have, basically.
Totally.
I would agree with both of you, and I think there's a harsh reality with award judging, which the supplementary stuff might get looked at a bit more when when at the first stage of judging. So if I just
Mm,
through what the judging stages are, which is that people are invited to be on the awards judging panels, and then they're put into groups, and there's a head of the kind of syndicate group for a number of different award entries. And then all of those award entry submissions will be shipped out or made available on a portal, actually, that then they can go on and we've got all the same criteria to judge against, and everybody will be submitting their scores. And then there's usually a chat. I mean, most often there's a then coordinated discussion amongst the panel that have been judging those awards to talk about what their findings were, what their thoughts were, what their scores, what led them to those scores. And that might move the numbers at the dials a little bit. And then the final submission sheets from every individual that's judged all get submitted in to the final panel, which is where it comes to the lead judge of each panel comes to a session with myself, and then we ask the person that led on that award entry to talk us through how straightforward this judging was for them, whether they've got a clear winner. We look at the scores that were attributed and we talk through the top two or three entries. And if there's one out and out entry that was absolutely slanged out, everybody agreed it, then it probably doesn't get much more discussion. But if there's one where, and this happens a lot, there's a couple of hot contenders, then we reserve our time to really get under the bonnet of those that are proving difficult to judge. And that's for me personally has been an important part of being chair, is really allowing us to get into the belt and braces of those that are either courting controversy or have divided the judges. And it's in those instances where we will relook at the submission and we may bring up some of the supporting stuff. But in the reality of how much we'll get through in a day, we're not at our, at this final level, going to have a lot of time to really get into that supporting stuff. So it's whether or not the judges that are in that first phase feel they need to lean into that. And if you're in a big awards category, you need to make your entry jump off the page if you're gonna get that far. And I think, you can hear Seb and Ishtar saying the same thing, is that the supporting stuff in many ways is a bit of a nice to have. And if you feel that you've got a video that really tells the story, put it in the award entry that there's a 3-minute video on this link that really tells this story, which we'd love you to see. Remember who you're writing this for. You're writing it for a group of very human judges that are trying to make a really good call on your submission. So that would be my advice on that. I haven't got any other questions in the chat. And I don't know whether you guys can talk to us, and I'm guessing you can't. I should have asked Jen that question. So I'm going to say if there's anything you want to. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Samantha, thank you so much. Really appreciate that feedback. There's a request in here from Freya to say, could this be made into some bullet points? And I'm going to ask Jen if that's something that probably AI is listening to this and it can probably do as a trans. Okay. I'm going to wrap up by just reminding you guys that the early bird submissions for all of those running a coordinated approach internally in their office is the 23rd of June. So it's coming up any time. And then and of course, early birds are a little bit cheaper. So, really use that as your deadline and get them in. But there's also final cutoff 17th of July. Then we'll be getting into our groups and doing all of our judging as I described. And you will be notified. I didn't actually ask Jen what month you'll get notified, but anybody that's been shortlisted will be notified. I'm going to guess from about August, do you think? Do you guys remember?
Hard to say. I don't want to promise anything with Jen.
But notifications, September, there it is. Notifications go out in September. And then the awards dinner this year is on the 18th of November, and it's going to be at the Royal Lancaster. And it's always a great event. And it's actually a lovely time to either be picking up an award yourself or watching your colleagues do it and networking with everybody in the industry. And I think in this day and age with so many people working from home, I really, advocate people making it to those occasions, because I think it's a really great opportunity to revel in all that is great about the work that we do in this industry and to feel inspired by the many, many amazing colleagues that we work amongst. So I think that's only left for me to say is thank you so much to Seb and Ishta for giving their time up this afternoon. I think you've both been exceptional, really, really great advice. I've loved listening to it. And I'll be getting the transcript myself. And we will be hoping to see many of you, many award submissions, and many of you on the in November. And good luck with it. Happy awards season. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks, Rachel.
guys. Thanks,
Bye.
Rachel.
Bye,
Bye.
bye.